Welcome, Julie, to this interview. Thank you for agreeing to do this. Would it be okay to get an introduction from me regarding
Sure.
what you do?
Amazing. So I'm Julie Creffield. I'm an innovation strategist. I work with a lot of SMEs around AI and technology and business growth. But I'm really fascinated by like everyday innovation. So I have some programs and some books that are for ordinary people who, might, be helped by thinking about innovation from an ordinary person's perspective. So I kind of have a couple of audiences, and I would describe myself as having a portfolio career. So I have a day job, and then I do consulting and coaching. I try not to say on the side because it doesn't feel like it's on the side. To me, it feels like it's one big life of adventure and work. But yeah, I do lots of things.
Amazing. Would you just share just a little bit who you work with, the different
Yeah,
groups?
so I work for the UK's largest provider of innovation spaces. So we have over 30 physical centres across the UK and Ireland that house startups. So they're physical spaces. We have co-working spaces and virtual licenses, but on the whole, they will hire a space from us. And my role is twofold, really, in the two centres that I'm based at. It's to create a culture of innovation and to do what we call placemaking, making sure that there's a calendar of exciting events and that we're really embedded into the local ecosystem. And then I guess I'm seen as the in-house business coach and the in-house innovation specialist. And I'm also a trained mental health first aider as well. So it's a real kind of holistic role around helping businesses to survive this crazy world of business, but also to thrive and grow.
Oh, amazing. Well, I'd love to take you back a little bit to your journey because I understand that you've already been coaching before getting qualified. So,
Yeah.
what made you decide to train with Animas?
Oh man. So I've always enjoyed helping people. And so when I was a youngster, I come from a really working class family and I guess as a kid, I had lots of help from like youth workers and teachers and I always had this feeling that when I grew up, I would want to do that too. I would want to help people. I guess when I was younger, I used to feel like worse off than me, like which sounds really awful now, but at the time that's how I felt. And so my early career was spent predominantly in the arts and in community settings, helping young people. So I did a lot of coaching without really having any coaching qualifications or skills. It was just about understanding people and helping them with their next step and understanding what they wanted to achieve and kind of creating programs and services that got all sorts of people to the next stage in their lives. I don't know that I would have called it coaching back then, but I realized that I did a lot of coaching, a lot of mentoring, a lot of training. And as my career progressed, it got a little bit more formalized and I started to do more courses and kind of CPD around leadership styles and things like that. But I still didn't really see myself as a coach.
And that's when you decided, to do the training.
Yeah, and I
Um,
think in the early part of my career, I still think I had a portfolio career. I would have day jobs and then projects. I'd be a freelancer on a really exciting project, but then have a day job. And I got made redundant quite a few times in my early career. And I got made redundant when I was pregnant with my daughter. So my daughter's 13 now, so it's quite a long time ago. And I set up a fitness business, and that involved quite a lot of coaching. And I think in the back of my mind, from I don't know, like making sure that I had good insurance and that, nobody could come after me if I gave bad advice. Like I didn't feel legitimate in calling myself a coach. I think it was the first time running that business that I would start to call myself a coach. And so I started to explore what does coaching actually mean and how is it different from just bossing people around and telling them what to do? Like, and so when I saw the Animas program, I thought it'd be really good for me to kind of formalize some of my natural skills and to really investigate the type of coach I wanted to be.
Absolutely. And then, well, actually, during the training, then, inside, what did you expect? Was it what you were expecting? Did anything surprise you? Yeah.
Oh man, I loved my time training with Animas. I loved all of the humans that I met. I love all of the trainers. Like the experience was so like how I love spending my time, getting to know different types of people, different perspectives. It was very interactive and engaging, so I liked the way it was delivered. I also really liked that you could have a strong opinion on something. So, I always knew through that training that me personally, I could never be a pure coach. I just don't have it in me to just deliver pure coaching and that be it. Like I am most definitely a mentor, a consultant, a trainer, and a coach. But I think what the training did was it helped me to develop some skills and the right language to be able to communicate that to the end user and to be able to kind of take myself out and ask permission. Can I boss you about and tell you what I think you should do next? Rather than pretending that that's okay in a coaching situation. So I think it's really developed my toolkit for being able to meet people where they need to be, or yeah, where meet them where they are and help them get where they want to get to.
That makes a lot of sense because I think a lot of people, it's a common misconception, I think, that if you are a pure coach, that you don't have the freedom to create your own style, later on. But what actually this does is it strengthens some of those muscles. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think
Mhm.
because of the business that I was running at the time, I was attracting clients who, I had a very active social media presence and people were coming to work with me because they saw what I was achieving and they wanted to be steered, they wanted advice, they wanted structure and methodologies and frameworks to move them forward. And so pure coaching would have been a bit of a weird thing to offer when they were coming to me, you know, like, I don't know, what do you think? It would have just been very bizarre to only do pure coaching. And so another thing that I've been reflecting on, particularly since the introduction of kind of AI, is I love creating frameworks. And I think that came from Animas. There were so many good frameworks that I was introduced to. They were good, but in my view, this might be a bit controversial, they weren't as good as they could be, right? So I'll give you an example of this. I remember learning the STAR framework,
Mm, mhm,
Animas, and I
mhm.
thought this is really good. And I love stars as a icon. So I was like, oh, this is going to be great. But I was like, there's something missing. And the missing part for me was that, okay, you do the star framework, then what? Where's the action off the back of it? So I took that model and I added a T to it. So it became the start model. And the T was about what tasks, what 5 tasks am I going to go off and do to move me forward? And so for me, that was about, acknowledging where the original framework come from, but also knowing for me personally and for my clients, I'm very action based. And that, I was never going to tell people what those tasks should be. Like that's up to them. But I was never going to leave them in a coaching situation where they didn't know what their next steps were.
Absolutely. This is really showcasing how an understanding of your style and also who your clients are and what they need
Yeah.
comes into play. So this is amazing. Can you remember maybe some differences though that the coaching training really did show up, that wasn't, quite there before without the training, how it
I don't
helped you?
know. Like, I don't think this was a reflection of Animas, but I think it's a reflection of possibly people going through coach training. I think we can be very precious and very judgmental about different approaches. And I try not to do that in any area of my life. I think everything's on a spectrum and we get to decide based on our ethics and values. And so I got a sense while we were training um, through some of my cohort and some of the people that I was online with, that wanting to make money from coaching was a bad thing. Like, and we see this play out on social media, and there's a little bit of like them and us. There's the good coaches who do it for the love of it, and then there's the other ones who are unethical. And I don't think it's as binary as that. And so for me, at the time that I was training with Animas, I was, a single parent. I was really trying to build wealth. I wanted to transform my own life through coaching. And so making money and building an ecosystem of products and services and coaching and consulting was super, super important to me. And so there was a little bit of tension, for me at least, around, the people pleaser in me wanted to be seen as a nice person and be really kind of ethically aligned and all of those things. But equally, I wanted to be able to, make money and, buy a house one day and all of those kind of things. So I think that tension still plays out in the coaching space. Um, and particularly in the online coaching space, like somehow it's unethical to make money through coaching, particularly extraordinary amounts of money. And somehow you're a martyr, like you're in it for the right reasons if you're perpetually poor as a result of your coaching practice, and I don't think either ends of those spectrums are very useful for us to kind of, be sitting in.
How did you navigate that? Yeah, that tension.
I think there's something about necessity, right? There's necessity when you're a solo parent, with one stream of income, and you've got a mortgage to pay and you've got bills. Like, I'm not going to undercharge, and I want to be able to be fully resourced as a human so that I can offer my clients a fully resourced version of me. Because if I'm in chaos and have a fridge that's empty and I don't know what next week holds, how can I hold space for other people that are, in some kind of turmoil? So I think it's partly that. I think it's also that I'm an ideator. I love coming up with products and services that are not one to one. So very early on, I understood that there's only so many hours in the day. And if I had a one-to-one coaching practice, I would be limited to how much money I could make. And my business at the time was 99% online. So it was perfect for a one-to-many model. And so I was in a very fortunate position at the time that the pandemic happened. I was already operating online, already had automations and an email list and all of those kind of things. And that's when my coaching practice shifted a bit more away from the uh, fitness business into business coaching, because so many of my peers were like, well, you're running an online business and it's working for you. Can you teach me how? And so, you know, that very much become when I started to productize my work, creating 12-week programs, 30-day sprints, being able to, I think I worked with 3,000 clients during 2020. And I created over 100 different kind of products, some of which were, coaching products, others were, digital products or books or, and I love that ability to look at the world and see that there's a challenge. And during the pandemic, it was, lots of offline businesses not knowing how to operate in the online world and not knowing how to monetize fast. That to me was a problem for so many people that I thought I can help here. I can genuinely give my perspective, some tools, and I talk about this a lot at the moment. I could be that human in the loop. Anybody can read a book, anyone can do an online training course, but having a human that checks in and says, how you doing? What's the resistance? Like, why haven't you done the things you said you wanted to? What do you need? That is so valuable in an online world where it's so easy just to shut your laptop off and pretend that your goals are not your goals, And so that human in the loop piece, I think, is even more important now that we can all just grab a chat bot and ask for advice on a piece of technology that doesn't care one way or the other.
The human element is still so, so important.
Yeah.
What have you found are the biggest barriers then? Because I think the business piece after becoming a coach, being qualifying as a coach, what are the biggest barriers have you found working with coaches that really stop them?
I mean, nobody enjoys selling. Everyone has this feeling like, oh, it's icky, but without selling, you're running a charity, a charity where you're not really being paid, and that serves nobody. So I think for me, I really like my clients to look at their own strengths. So I love Clifton Strength Finder as a tool. I think it's really useful to personalize. So although I have frameworks and processes that I encourage my clients to go through, I always encourage them to do it with the lens of their strengths and their values. right? But also what their personal circumstances are. You know, I might work with two similar coaches in a similar field, but one of them has a wealthy husband and the mortgage is paid, and it doesn't really matter financially whether they make money in the next 6 months or not. Whereas the other coach, you know, completely self-reliant, paying rent every month, and if they don't make money, then they're in real big problems. My advice and my support for those two individuals has to be different
Mm, mhm, mhm,
because the risks and the challenges and the opportunities are different. You know, so I
mhm,
think it's about asking the right questions, encouraging people to listen to their gut. You know, just because there's somebody online that says you can make £1 million this way, A doesn't mean it's true, B doesn't mean it's going to work for you. So I think it's about understanding that at the heart of every business is a human with strengths and weaknesses. You know, I have things that I hate doing in my business and I get triggered emotionally. I'm like, oh my God, like my rejection sensitivity is, you know, off the charts. But I come up with strategies to overcome that. You know, and I think that's why I like the one-to-many model, because I can put out loads of stuff and get, you know, 20 or 30 people say yes, even if 100 people say no. Like, I'm okay with
mhm.
that. Like, whereas if I was selling one to one and got four no's in a row, oh my God, I'd be questioning my life choices, you know? So I think it's about just understanding who you are as a human and working with it, not against it.
Yeah, what really works for you, isn't it? I think that's one of the main messages that we talk about in the business resources that we have at Animas. At at the heart of it is understanding you, your authenticity first, and then almost all of the practical stuff gets clarified
Yeah,
after that.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. But also, there are some business basics that you cannot avoid,
I
right?
would love to hear that from you.
You know, and so, you know,
You
I work with all sorts of businesses, everything from solopreneurs right up to, you know, multi-million-pound bigger
mm,
companies. And it's always the humans that are flawed, right? It's always the humans that kind of mess up, make bad decisions, don't do what they say they're going to do. Like that happens across the board, right? So it's not like once you get to a certain size of company, you're all good. Like, um, and businesses go out of fashion, and businesses, you know, there are so many stories in innovation, for example, of really popular, you know, successful companies that go under because somebody in senior management didn't listen to their audience, didn't look at trends, thought that they were immune to big innovation shifts. And so there is something, I think, about future gazing and
mm,
building in regular touch points. Like I call them my blue sky days. It's a bit of a weird, I have a color coded system. So once a quarter, I have to have a blue sky day where it's no tasks, no doing, no coaching, where I'm really reviewing in my own business what's working, but also what's happening out there in the world. What's future trends? Like where do I need to be in 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, so that I'm not just in the weeds all of the time. And so I think there
mm,
are
mhm,
some business practices around setting KPIs and setting targets. So many coaches don't know what a profitable business looks like. If
mm,
you know, if you ask them how many clients do you need a month to be, you know, profitable, they're unable to answer that. And I don't think that is a mathematical problem. I think it is a an issue with facing the reality of what it takes to build a profitable coaching business, you know. And I think sometimes from a money mindset perspective, we're a little bit afraid to put ourselves out there and say what we actually want. So what I often hear in people's language is, what I would like or what I need. And I'm like, it's quite soft in the language. It's a little bit like, you know, oh, I would feel like I was making progress if I, you know, replaced my last salary or if I was able to contribute a little bit to the rent. Like, and there's nothing wrong with those ambitions, but I would love for people to be a little bit more ambitious, because if you say, you know, I want to build a six-figure business, or I want to be able to send my kids to private school, or I want whatever the thing is, it doesn't matter, whatever you're, you know, I want to work a 3-day week. what that means is you then build your business backwards. You're able to say, well, if that's the goal, what do I need to sell? And how far away am I? Do I have products and services that help me reach that? Or, if I'm selling coaching that's £10 an hour and I only have 40 hours a week, the maths tells you the story. So like there's nothing wrong with building a business of any shape or size. Like I'm not the person saying if we all have to have six-figure businesses. But for me, as a solo parent, I have to earn a certain amount to be able to have the same lifestyle as a couple that are raising a child. And that's the reality. And I think that's what's always driven me to be quite goal orientated from a finance perspective. Because what I realized during the pandemic, I made more money than I'd ever made in my life. It didn't make me happier because of the money. It made me happier because of the impact that I was having. And I know that sounds really like, oh, I hate even saying that out loud. It made me sound like an idiot. But genuinely, that's how I felt. I wasn't sitting there fanning myself with my cash, thinking about what designer goods I was, all of the things that I loved spending money on, I couldn't do anyway. I couldn't spend time with friends. I couldn't travel. I couldn't go on retreats. All the things that I enjoyed spending money on, you couldn't do during the pandemic because of lockdown. So the money was useless to me, and what I realized, I loved the scale of the impact that I was having and the volume of work that I was doing and how fulfilling that work was. I also realized that intensity of work didn't feel like freedom. And so I scaled things back after 2020 because I just didn't want to be working so hard. And sometimes you have to get there to realize it. And so I'm constantly adjusting. And it's partly why I took on a full-time role because I wanted to have colleagues and I didn't want to be doing so much sales and I wanted to be working with slightly bigger companies and I wanted to really investigate AI. And I'm just getting to the end of doing a degree level apprenticeship in commercial innovation. I wanted to go back into education, like all of those things, were about me using coaching skills to investigate that in myself and then taking action on it.
I think that that's what's coming through as well in terms of you're creating a practice is your ability to pivot and being okay with it, that this it's not just one path. The path can swivel, and that's
Yeah.
totally okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the exercises that I loved during Animas, I reference it all the time, was future pacing. We did a session that was a physical session, which I loved. I loved that we weren't sitting at our desks, we were in a physical space. And being able to to go into the future. And I remember at the time I was living in a 2-bedroom apartment in Stratford in East London, and I really wanted to move out of London and I wanted to move to a certain area. I now live in that area. And I know that doing that exercise in that room with my peers really helped me to realize that it was within my grasp. I was able to see it in my mind's eye, think about the steps that was required, who I needed to be to make that brave choice. Like some of those tools are so powerful, and but sometimes we forget they exist, so it's sometimes
Exactly.
useful to have a little bit of a library of kind of frameworks and exercises that you revisit from time to time.
Absolutely. And I want to ask you about AI and innovation because that's your bag. So in this changing world, how does coaching, well, what makes coaching feel more relevant now more than ever, in your opinion?
I think as humans, we're always looking for solutions, right? This we are complex, and we are consumed with pain and pleasure, right? It's always that balance, like, how can I get more of what I want and do less of what I don't want? And coaching, whether it's self-coaching or working with a coach, is a route to that. It's a route to self-development and to finding solutions to challenges. And AI, by its nature, gives you that in an instant, right? And there is something different about asking a friend or a coach or a family member for their advice and giving an app the same question, right? An app doesn't care one way or the other, right? It doesn't have a perspective. AI doesn't have a perspective. And there is something from a psychological safety perspective that is brilliant about being able to go to an entity that doesn't care one way or the other. And so
Mhm.
I'm a massive fan of exploring AI for coaching uh, purposes. I think we need to do some more work around educating people around the risks and the guardrails for things like AI hallucinations and stuff like that. But I think it's opening up, and I don't want to use the word therapeutic, but it kind of is. It's opening up some therapeutic avenues to people that cannot access them for either financial reasons, literacy reasons, and all of those kind of things. Like one of the things that I'm most proud of, I had somebody doing a little bit of work in my house who was fixing something for me, and I needed to buy a product. And I said, "Oh, what's the product?" And he said, "Oh, he said it, and I said, "Oh, how do you spell that?" And he said, "Oh, I can't spell it." He said, I'll get my wife to send you a text message." And he was somebody that I knew quite well, he was my brother's friend. And I said, "Oh, you should use AI, you should use ChatGPT." And he said, "Oh, I've got that on my phone." So I said, "Just talk into it and it will show me how it's spelled." It's literally transformed his business. So he's a tradesperson, he goes around, he's like a handyman and whatever. That ability to use a piece of technology to overcome a learning difficulty that he's struggled with for 40 years, transformational, and so
Mhm.
I think a lot of people are move into using AI for advice, behavioral stuff. How can I say this to my boss without getting fired? How can I speak to my child in a way that they're going to respect me? And I've used it for all sorts of things, and I've been because of the work that I'm doing around kind of everyday innovation, I'm writing a series of books about different types of problems that we have and how we might be able to use AI to solve them. I used it for myself to lose weight, right? So using it as a companion, using it to do all the maths of weight loss. So some of it was technical, but some of it was cheerleading. It was having somebody, and I know that sounds weird because they're not a body, but having a voice that doesn't judge me and being able to train my custom GPT to be non-judgmental, to have all the values that are important to me. Um, that helped me to lose 7 stone in weight. Whereas I've worked with humans for years to try and help me do that, and I've not been successful. So there are so many different applications of using AI in a coaching, companion, assistant, co-pilot kind of way that a lot of the boundaries are being blurred around at what point do you get a human in the loop? And there are so many AI products that are being developed for the NHS, for cancer treatments, for dementia, for the care industry. I work quite closely with a local college, and I went in to speak to their kind of principal, and she was showing me all the AI uses. For their social care students, they have AI dolls that they're learning how to work with older patients by having an AI doll that assesses their, you know, like there's a lot of fear mongering about the use of AI, but I think what it does potentially is free up humans to do the stuff that only humans can do. You know, um, it's a bit like the wild wild west out there at the moment in terms of AI. And I think we as humans are so early in this adoption of it, that it's going to take us a while to catch up to realize, that not everything we read online is true. Robots may be coming for some of our jobs, but not all of them. We may see more coaching and therapeutic and humans in the loop. We may need more of that than ever. We might have a time in the future where people stop using AI for that kind of stuff and go primarily back to humans. But I think we're in that phase at the moment where everyone's just excited by the possibility. They're like, right,
Yeah.
I'm going to explore it.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's so exciting. It's so true. It's such a powerful tool. I mean, even in, someone who's just qualified, the people who are qualifying now as coaches, being able to have quick business brainstorming, how much do I, with the finance stuff, the
Yeah.
copywriting stuff, that is a massive help,
And I think
Um,
this is the
mhm.
interesting piece, right? If you look at history, we productivity, and I'm thinking a lot about productivity because I'm writing a book on it at the moment. We were humans living really balanced lives, and then the Industrial Revolution came along and we all had to become super productive, right? We were part of a machine to create, productivity and commerce and stuff. And then came, the internet and technology, and then we all become knowledge professionals. So, it was all about your education and being able to be an expert in something. We don't need to be experts in anything anymore because we now have, AI. But what I think we do require, and this may be difficult for younger generations, but I think what is still required of us as humans is wisdom. It's a perspective, it's a nuanced approach. Um, but you're right, for somebody qualifying who says, I don't know how to do this, like, I don't know how is not really a valid reason for anything anymore. We can't use that as an excuse. Like, and we don't even have to go and Google something anymore. Like, we can get really high quality advice on how to do anything, right? We can break it down step by step, and for things that are complex and for things that have traditionally been gate kept, the legal profession, finance, all of that kind of stuff, the ability to translate complex information into tangible, useful information, what a time to be alive.
The accessibility
Mm,
piece is that's what I'm hearing is the main impact, and perhaps this is going to really sharpen our understanding of what what is human, what is humanity, like you said, the wisdom, what does human connection really look like, what's the value of that, because yeah, it's we're
yeah.
seeing, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
And it's so funny because sometimes people will ask me about the future and like, I don't know, I'm not a futurist, right? And when on a good day, I'm like, maybe we'll go back to kind of ancient civilizations where actually most people don't need to work, right? You might do a couple of hours of tending to your vegetables and, but other than that, we sit around and we write poetry and we talk about art and we like maybe that is what lives in our future. Like, and maybe this thing that everybody goes into an office and everybody has to be, highly educated and highly skilled, maybe we don't as humans need that, and maybe that will be good for our mental health, and we will be happier as a species.
wow, what kind of world would that be, right? Like it's a bit hard to imagine right
It is.
now. Yeah, but oh, this is very exciting. Well, just to go back then, 'cause obviously with people who are training to be coaches, what would you say to someone who's already doing it, similar to where you are, um, and they're wondering if coach training is worth doing? What would be
Yeah.
your advice?
I
Yeah.
mean, I was a little bit conflicted when I made the decision because it was a big commitment, not just in terms of the finances of it, but the time. And actually, on reflection, it was giving myself the time, every session, every, piece of homework that we got, every new skill that I acquired and then went and tested. It just meant that my skill and my confidence was increasing over and over and over again. And that did wonders for my business, because I was able to go, oh, I've just learned something new. How might I use that in my own practice? And I would be, really excited to go and test it. Um, I don't think, for me personally, I don't ever go, oh, I'm a qualified coach. I don't use that. Some people do, and some people like, the letters after their name and all of that. That doesn't really float my boat particularly. Um, and I also think that you can be an incredible coach without a qualification. I think both of those things can exist. But in terms of the community, in terms of giving yourself space to improve and to grow in confidence, and the frameworks for me, it was, I could have probably just read a book to get some of those frameworks, but the process of taking them on, testing them, talking them through with colleagues, like that was just such a luxury, right? And it really did encourage me to not just take things as given and to develop my own frameworks.
Completely. It's a starting ground, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one step in the long path. Um, Well, Julie, please tell us, where we can find you, everything that you want us and everyone who's listening to this to know about you.
Yeah, sure. So it's very easy to find me online. Juliecreffield.com is my website. It's all about kind of my business coaching. But what I'm doing really at the moment is directing people to my books. So I've got a series of books called the Everyday Innovation Series, all different topics, everything from, using AI for weight loss, using it for ADHD, everyone is tackling a challenge, or an opportunity. And so over the next kind of 12 months or so, my plan is to write 12 of them. I'm up to book number 5 and 6 that I'm writing simultaneously at the moment. And yeah, like I'm just really, my mission is to, help a million ordinary people get their heads around AI and to use it to make life a bit easier.
Amazing, a million people. And that's the thing. I think it's the education piece that's so important around AI. So thank you so much for doing that and for sharing
You're
so
welcome.
openly your experience. And yeah, we would love to add all of the information. You'll find everything in the description box. So thank you so much
Thank
today,
you.
Julie.